Well, Harden, I'm sure showing you Coinneach MacIomhair is key the show. She's an amateur Peigi Ullaigean. I'm here today with a lady who knows this district very well, better than most of us who live in this district and have lived here all our lives. Her name is Peigi Peigi Morrison, all the way from Detroit, especially to do this interview with us at Coinneach MacIomhair. Not quite true, Peigi, but nevertheless, you've got...
Take me Gaelic.
Take it, there you are. Cavri. Agus son y dyn ha gwmad tros doch nach pick at the farach at machine is the viola. Now, Peigi, first of all, Coll, Peigi Ullaigean. Who was Ullaigean?
Ullaigean was my father, and he was Mac Coll Mòr, and he got his nickname because he was present as an old woman who had a good sense of humour, and she was talking to some friends from Glasgow, and she said, "What's it like in Glasgow?" And he said, "You wouldn't like it a bit because they're just a bunch of hooligans there." And she says, "We have our own hooligans here, and this is the biggest one of all." So that's how my father got his name.
So it was therefore a derivation of the word hooligan.
Exactly.
And when we were young at school, we used to call boys who came from Glasgow hooligans.
Yep, absolutely.
And so you're Peigi Ullaigean, who was married to another Coll girl, Agnes Coinneach Mòr.
Yes.
So now, Agnes Coinneach Mòr, 31 Coll.
36.
36 Coll. Okay, so a boy and a girl from Coll got married. Did they get married before they went to Detroit or in Detroit?
They got married in Detroit, but originally my father chummed around with a fellow called the Caracan and the Peel. They were very close, and my mother went with a sister of each one of them. They were very good friends, so they all seemed to branch off together, and my father and mother were left over apparently, so they made the best of it too.
Had they gone to Detroit independently of each other then?
Yes, they did.
So what did your father go over to do?
Well, he had studied at Yarrows, and he was in engineering, so he thought that he'd go over, and he went on a Metagama with two other fellows that we were very, very friendly with, and even their families were friendly enough with us that we kind of lived in each other's back pockets all the time, because we had quite a crew in the Detroit area. But he went immediately to Detroit and started sailing right off the bat.
What we forget is that there are huge lakes just beside Detroit.
Right.
You know, like an ocean, really.
Which was surprising because you couldn't really look all the way across it. It wasn't like looking from Coll to Point. It was not like that at all. No.
And yet Detroit itself, at its narrowest point, is within a stone's throw of the United States.
Yes.
Of Canada, rather.
Yeah, right.
Because on one side you have Detroit, on the other side you have Windsor, Ontario.
Yes, and there's actually Windsor wraps around so much that it's actually south of Detroit instead of north where you'd expect Canada to be.
A lot of the Lewis boys in days of old used to cross the bridge there.
Yes.
To get illegally from Canada to the States, didn't they?
They had to have a certain amount of money before they could go. So they'd go in groups of 3, and one of them would stay back and 2 of them would go back over to Canada to bring 2 others with each one of them. So they got a whole bunch of them back at the same time with the same amount of money.
So by the time you came on the scene, your father and mother had got married over there.
Yes.
In quite a big community of Lewis people, and even from this district.
Yes, that's correct.
Tell me a little about what that community was like when you were growing up.
Well, it's hard to describe them. They were very close, and they met every month, and they kept an actual log of what was going on and the minutes and so forth. And I think I read the minutes myself, and it said that there was a group coming from Harris to visit one time, and they asked if they could join the Lewis Society. And they put it to a vote and they were turned down. But we all were very close together, and the offspring can be all over the world and away from each other for at least 20, 25 years, and it's just like we all knew each other. We were just like brothers and sisters all the time.
And people went
and the people were like that. They were very close.
And they went to the same church as well over there, didn't they?
Yes.
And services were in Gaelic very often.
It was mostly Gaelic, yes. And it was founded really, I think it really took place because of Murdo McCritchie, who stayed at our house for about a year before he moved on to some theological place, and then he came back and he was very active in getting the funds together to have the free church over there.
But before then though, as you know, courtesy of people like yourself and the late Murdo Martin, anybody who wants to look at the archives of the Lewis Society of Detroit can do so here now in Stornoway. We took them over from Stornoway after the trip 10 years ago, and they're in the library in Stornoway with the little books of the Constitution.
Yes,
of
and
the Lewis.
Two gavels.
Yes, gavels, the gavels as well, yes. So these are now in the library in Stornoway, because the truth of the matter is, as that generation grew older, others didn't come out to Detroit, and you're now of the next generation, and your generation, the next generation, basically has moved on.
Yes, so there'll be a missing link if it's not taken care of right now. But I took copious notes from that, about who was. I think they had numbers for each person that became a member. The only thing is they just put their regular names down. They didn't put nicknames, and they didn't put where they were from, whether it was from Lionel Ness or Coll back or whatever it happened to be.
And who were the others from here that people might know, or whose families might still be in the district here at that time when your father was there?
Well, there was a Dulach Vuk who was raised by, I think she and her sister were, I think they were left without parents, and they were raised by Anakos family, and they frequently asked about Dulach Vuk. And then there was a Coinneach MacIomhair, and she was married to Dolan Lowdy, and I think they were one of those that got the Gress Crofts during the Raiders' time. And there was another family that was over here first, and they went to Canada, and I think the fellow had lived in Vatisker, and he could still name all the people that were in the houses there. And he was good at distributing any news or gossip that went around. I think he was known as the Stornoway Gazette himself.
Yeah. Wasn't there somebody?
And that was a Gowner.
Wasn't there
his wife?
That's what I was saying. There was somebody called a Gowner.
Yes.
Was that the Gowner?
That was his wife's family.
Oh sure. And who was the Gowrick's people here?
The Gowrick's people are from Thai Innisfarokiowak. I think he's called Tunti in Coll. And I believe the grandchildren are coming over this month for another visit. They come every once in a while. But I was very close to them because the Gowrick was one of the three that my father came over with. And the Gowrick got his name because as a child they say he used to go in his bare feet and run out in the snow. So that's how he got his name. So I've often thought that I should ask the question how these people got their names.
So who were the other two who went over?
Angus Young was the one boy who's coming with his wife this month.
No, I mean who were the ones who went over to your father? You said three went over with your father.
That was the Gowrick and Dolan Lowdy.
Okay. But when I went over there, they didn't feel lonely because there were quite a few Lewis people there before them.
Not too many,
Not
but
too many.
there were some. This Katie Ann Buntain was married to a fellow from Ullaigean. She was, I knew her well because she was a second mother to me, but in those days she had a house that turned into a boarding house. And I think she took women in first that came over because, you know, just looking through the records of the Lewis Society, I could see the addresses all being the same, so I knew that they were staying with Katie Ann, and then finally it was all the boys that were doing that. And I think my father also roomed with a cousin called Ian Wallace and my mother's brother Bill for a while, so they had their own place. In fact, after the honeymoon, I think that's where mother happened to go, and she said it was so cold in that place that she had to wear my father's wedding jacket to keep warm. And the next morning she had to get up and make breakfast for all the rest of them there. So that's not like a visit to Niagara Falls for your honeymoon anyway.
What kind of work did people get? Your father was working on the lakes. What kind of
Quite a few of them went on the lakes, but most of them went into the factories. You know, Ford and Chrysler and that sort of thing.
Because I remember when I was over there, you were showing me a building, a couple of buildings that people from this area had actually worked on, and they had actually engraved their names on
Yes, yes. It was one of the tall buildings, and we found out that there was supposed to be 2 towers to this building, and there was only one. And I think we brought that information when we went over there because we'd heard that there were, I think, 5 or 7 of them that actually were helping with the building of this thing. And on the 30th floor, they either engraved their names or put it some way on a certain corner on this thing. So that I said if you happened to look at King Kong, you'd wish that you could actually go up to the 30th floor and read this thing. But they all signed their names on it. They were all Masons.
And at that time, later on, wasn't it one of the buildings that was built at that time physically totally moved on wheels along to another site?
No, that was another very big church.
Yeah,
That was a Mariners' church.
That's right.
And there was the only one who would tackle the job was called Frangus. He had a brother Ullaigean and Jack McLeod here, and I think
that's the Kiwi and Naomi's father, so that people will know who it is.
Leopard was one.
Leopard, okay.
And I think there was another one, but I can't remember what his name was. Frangus was another.
Yes.
And Frangus was the one who actually did the moving. It was the entire church. It was not demolishing it and putting it back together. It was the entire church. He was a tough fellow. And we used to be scared of him because he had the biggest hands you've ever seen. And we just got frightened at his appearance.
See, Detroit then and Detroit nowadays are very different places, because I remember you taking me round downtown Detroit and pointing out to me where the various families lived.
Yes.
It was like down Glasgow, you know, it was like tenements and that kind of thing. Nobody that you know lives there now.
No. But there was the small houses, and we had Morrison South that came over with you, and we tried to find where his father was.
Grandfather.
Was it his grandfather?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Scalp.
And we couldn't find that house. It was just a very short street, but Katie Ann Buntain, who took all these others in, that house I still recognized myself, but there was no sign of the other one.
No.
Which saddened him a great deal.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were as well known here in Bach and Coll and Gress as you were probably over in Detroit, because you used to come very often over
Very
here. Very
often. I was over for the first time when I was 2 years old and have quite a few recollections from that time even. I can remember my Aunt Annie having me in bed one time, and she was showing me a picture, and it scared the devil out of me. It was the ugliest looking thing I have ever seen. And Mother said, no, Annie she loved you so much, she would never want to frighten you in any such way. And I said, I still remember that. Well, we went over when I was 13 years old, when I went to the Nicholson for a whole year. And the first night, we were put up with the grown-ups in one room, and we were thrown up with a nice fire blazing in the Coinneach, as they called it. And I was there with the younger cousins. And while we were sitting there with the fire flickering, I spotted this very ugly picture at the back of the fireplace. It was a Maori chief with all the tattoos and his hands out and the tongue outstretched, because my aunt had been going with this fellow at the fishing, and he immigrated to New Zealand, and that's where she ended up first, and so she must have gotten some of these pictures from him. So that was the same picture.
So it did exist.
It did exist.
But the thing is, what I'm just trying to think of just now, a 2-year-old, a 13-year-old coming from Detroit, coming to Coll, Gress, black houses, no running water, no tarred roads.
No radio on Sunday.
Indeed, and no running water.
That's correct.
Can you?
Well, it was very difficult, to put it mildly. I was not thrilled at coming, but as the time went by, my whole thinking changed, because I was very homesick leaving, and have been very close with the ties that I have here. I think I have more friends and relations than the children of Israel, probably.
But you used to come often, and you got to know everybody so well. But then there was one famous occasion, still remembered by some in this community, when you came here with your slacks, as they called them then, your sunglasses, and with your big white car.
I have good recollections of that too.
Was it a Cadillac?
No, it was a Pontiac.
Well,
it was a big car.
It was big by our standards.
Yes. It went to many dances over in Carlow. I think there was a time we had 8 there, and we left behind Choki Agora, who's in New Zealand now, and he looked very sad, and we said, come on in anyway. So he ended up in the back seat in this direction. And we went very low and very slowly on the...
Well, I was in New Zealand last year, but unfortunately, although I met Joki's wife, I didn't meet himself at all. And you got to know a lot of the handsome young boys in Coll back and Gress at that time too, didn't you?
I had crushes on numerous.
Go on, spill the beans.
Oh dear. Well, Callum, of course, was number 1.
That was Peigi Morrison from Braga.
Right.
Whose auntie was the headmaster, Mr. Madison's wife.
Right. Exactly. In fact, I followed him over to Braga one time for a wedding, and it was your parents' wedding that I attended that time. My parents went earlier. I came home very sad that they had gone without me. And I saw John MacIomhair with a bus going by our house, and I said, are you going over to Braga to get the Yes, I said, give me 10 minutes, and I grabbed my cousin Modak, we grabbed our glad rags, hopped on the bus, and spent the entire night over there, dancing and watching what was going on.
And hence the famous 10-second movie of my parents.
Exactly.
Coming out of the Coinneach that's been knocked flat now in Braga, and made national television of it about 12 years ago.
Right.
So, but who were the handsome young men at that time? Because I think I know some of them. You know, Jock McLennan.
Oh, you've been doing some investigating, haven't you?
Ullaigean.
Yes, but he was a cousin. Cousins
No,
in my book did not get married.
No, but he was.
Oh yeah,
he was one of the handsome young. Yeah. Who were the other ones at that time? Who were the
back? His sister was not too thrilled with me, Christiane, because he had handed me a para-handy book, and we used to talk to each other like this, and she thought I was making fun of all the people by talking like that, but we talked back and forth like that. And George was a beautiful dancer. So was Ian Matheson, the schoolmaster's son. He was a lovely dancer. In fact, he asked me to dance, and I said, I don't know how to do the Saint Velitas. I can do the others, but none of those. And he looked at me as if, well, you're dancing with everyone else in the hall. So I learned how to do the Velita the next time, and I went up to him as a lady's choice, even though it wasn't after that, at a later date.
How were you regarded? Because I remember you telling me one time there was some guy didn't believe you were American and thought you were a Coll girl putting on a false accent.
Oh, that was one of the Grata Point guys. He was from Flesher. I don't know what his name is. I don't know if he ever got married to anyone, but all these people that I cared about were up there at the pier to see me off. And there must have been about 25 wonderful people, relatives and friends that I'd collected over the years. And this fellow was trying to interrupt, and he was saying, "Who do you think you are with this phony American accent? Where do you think you're getting on?" And Shor Spiken, not Shor Spiken, but Shor Safil, my own cousin, was trying to get him to go away, and he still persisted. And this is the first time I ever knew that George ever felt that he could knock somebody out, because his knuckles turned the whitest white you've ever seen. He was ready for battle.
They were cross. They were offended on your behalf.
Yes, they were. They stood up for me.
And well, so who were the families you knew? I know Ullaigean and Alistair. Who were the other families that you knew well and at that time?
Well, it was at Hunties across the way, and Dan next door, whose niece is Annie Matheson, that comes over quite often. And I knew most of the ones.
You mean Anna Brand?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then of course there was Coinneach and Coll and Coll and Wallace, Johnny and Ulseth, Vance, Alec John. I knew most of the ones. And Yach and Yach, Giant, which was a very warm and welcoming place. And
that wasn't Coll,
yes.
but you knew back and Gress too, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Well, when I was over at first, that first week that I was not happy to be there, Mother marched me across the way. Instead of going the main road, we took the long way around, the shortcuts. And we went to just about every house in back, and then we crossed the river at the Polygon to go over to Gress, and we went to all the visitors over there, and I said, I will never do this again. And I ended up going to every single one of those houses every time I came back over.
Yes. So the reluctance of youth became the enthusiasm of later life.
Well, in Gress, there was Coinneach, there was Hrui, there was Alec John Vorocodrunch, and Alec, of course. And I can't remember the names of all of the rest of them, but they're a goodly number.
Yes. And you knew Charles Spark and all of them, and
yes.
all of these people. Yeah. And then things changed. You only took the white car over once, and I guess nowadays, you'd have probably been in the jail for the number of people that were in it, because as you were saying, because Colin Dan, the field, I know, and people like that used to enjoy going for a drive in it, didn't they?
Well, actually, the one who had a drive in it was Kenny Frockan up in Stornoway. He looked at the car and he says, "That's a lovely bit of goods."
Sure.
And I said, "Would you like to take a ride in it?" So we did go a little there, but the one who took a ride in it was Don Alistair, Ullaigean, because I went to visit him there at the school, and he said, let's go and see the Gaelic group there, the younger ones.
Well, that was later on.
That
This
was
was later, yeah.
And he said that he had been taking a ride in this car,
Sure.
but he was describing it, and he says, in Gaelic, he was saying it was from this wall to this wall. And this woman's from Detroit, where they make cars like this. And does any one of you want to ask her a question? And nobody was saying anything. And one boy very hesitantly raised his hand like this, and I knew what he was going to say. He said, "They knew how." And I was about to say, Methuselah, and before I could get that out, Dom Alistair says, you're going to learn early in life that you never ask a woman's age.
So Dom Alistair, the blicker in the car, became the headmaster in Bach, and was highly regarded by us all in that.
And he knew he was in these early movies that, you know, following behind the plough or something when the horse was ploughing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
And we saw his picture there. I looked at it.
Yes, you were so kind as to let us have a lot of your photos, and I think when we were over there 12 years ago, and we had 3 successful nights here where we filled the school twice, and Town Hall as well, showing people a selection of these pictures, and we'll record it. We'll get copies of some of them here. We'll also get a copy of these ones, and hopefully put them on the Coinneach site at some stage.
I think you had my grandmother too, didn't you? She was there with Lassak, her cousin, and she was taking a cane and she was saying, this is a movie, and she says, we're supposed to start moving. So she's showing the cane, and the two of them started walking. But before she took 2 steps, I think she lifted her skirt to show her stocking or something.
And Machashaw.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I remember these. They were quite something. It's a pity you're not here later on in the year when people have, you know, have more time to sit, and we could have organised another night. Would have been good fun with yourself rather than us telling the story, although we did do so. But the Coll, Bach and Gress you knew then, in the late 40s and late 50s. When you look at it now, completely different.
Well, it thrills some people to see all these wonderful houses, but it gives me a feeling of sadness to see how things have changed so much.
Everywhere changes though.
Everything changes.
Detroit changes.
Yeah.
You don't live in Detroit technically
you don't
anymore.
go through Woolworths where you're meeting every other person.
Yeah.
You just got out of the rain, and if you wanted to see somebody, you would automatically run into them right there.
Before I forget, what are your memories of that year you spent in the Nicholson in the late, when was it, 1947 was it?
That was 1947-48.
What was it like?
It was great fun. It was a lot of fun. We were the wandering class because we didn't really have one room. And when I went back again to reminisce about it, that particular wing in Francis Street was knocked down, so that was no longer there, because I could remember they had double seats and I could put the people's names to those if I had been able to see them again. But we wandered from class 1A and 1B wherever we happened to go, and we were in the clock building, which was the coldest tomb you've ever walked into, and we had to memorize things like Quin Corim of Nineveh from distant Ophir rowing home to heaven in sunny Palestine, which I'm sure that you probably had too.
Do you know this, that I did? That John Masefield.
One of my, yes.
Was it?
Yes, it was.
Oh, well, there you are. Something stuck somewhere.
I was talking to a classmate just a week ago, John Kennedy. He was one of my classmates, and we recited it over the telephone together. Because I'm trying to get some of those classmates together, because I'd like to take them together, and I don't know how many of them are still around.
Remind us, who are your main teachers that you can remember?
Oh, there was Ina Smith, who I had for science. She was a very good and thorough teacher. I liked her very much. But Bulldog was my favorite because she had a very dry sense of humor. She used to say things that we had to correct, like one time his wardrobe for sale suitable for gentlemen with swinging doors.
Okay.
That was one thing I remembered from that.
Well, Ina Smith was better known to my generation as Saucy.
Miss MacDonald was Bulldog.
I thought Miss Mackenzie was Bulldog.
Miss Mackenzie was.
Yes.
Miss MacDonald was known as the Mole. I didn't have her.
I don't know the Mole. Was the Sparrow there?
If he was, I didn't have him.
Was Albert Nichol there?
Yes.
He taught history.
In fact, he was the one whose class we were put in at first before they didn't quite know where to put us. And he was questioning us, myself and Ishmael Scotch, who came over at the same time, about what it was like in Detroit and American history. And we were answering all the questions. And of course, the class we were with was looking at us and they were just making funny faces at us all the time.
I see.
So that's what we did. And we had Lofty for one class, for
yes.
Bible only. And Miss McCrae, who was the Stornoway minister's daughter.
Okay. That's Kenny I's mother. She's still alive, but she's 102.
Yes. I finally caught up with her because I went to see Bulldog and herself many years later.
Charlie Taylor? Was he doing French there?
No, we had a Miss Cheyne, Cheyne, who was very fussy about pronunciation, as was the rector, who took her class one day when she wasn't there.
Addison.
And he says, "Oh, you're from Detroit, Michigan." I said, "Yes." Well, he says, "I'd like you to stand up and conjugate avoir." So I started and I said, "J'ai tu a." He says, "Two? It's not two, it's tu. Stand up, please, and say that 15 times." And I'm going, "Tu, tu, tu," with everyone laughing around me. And you know how when you get laugh and it just kind of grabs you here, and I'm going, "Tu, tu, tu."
That's a very Stornoway tu, isn't it? I am
well,
tu.
It's a very well, it could be.
I am tu. J'ai, tu as. Il a.
Ils a.
Ils a. Nous avons, vous avez, ils ont.
Ils ont. And Miss Cheyne was very fussy about pronunciation.
And I'm just trying to remember
Tout
who.
le reste à l'espérance et que l'hiver fuit loin de nous. Sous le beau ciel de notre France, quand le soleil revient plus doux.
C'est très difficile. Je ne comprends qu'un petit peu. How did education in Canada and what you came across in the Nicholson, did they compare at all? Or were they similar?
They were very thorough, but you learned it because it was going by rote over and over again. You think, oh, not again. But it was good enough because the day was from 8:20 until about 4:20. And we learned not just French pronunciation and grammar, but we had to translate stories from this. And then with mathematics, it was math like if it took a man 2 hours to dig a hole 5 feet deep, how long would it, this type of thing. And we had geometry and we had algebra. So when I went back to Detroit, back to the high school, they were making out my schedule and they said, well, you take French. And I said, I've had 1 year of French. Geometry, I've had 1 year of geometry. How about algebra? I had one, so they double promoted me. So I gained 1 year there and graduated from my high school when I was 16. Not because I was particularly clever, but I was clever enough to skip a grade anyway.
Isn't that interesting? And were you still coming back over to back at that time?
I came back after I graduated from university, and as a teacher I was coming over every summer because I think I had more friends and relations than I actually had in Detroit, because I remembered, from that 1 year at the Nicholson.
And now I'm going to get you to tell me another story just now. probably others.
You're trying to stump me this time.
No, I'm not at all. But it's in relation to your own family as well, and a stone you have taken back to the island, which you're going to present to the community in Coinneach. And this is a stone that was given to you personally by the lady who found it.
She found it on the croft.
On a croft in Coinneach. That is the croft on which the famous stones were found. Tell me the story. Who was the lady?
Well,
how did you know?
I was told that she was a relation of my grandfather, Coinneach Mòr. And I didn't know exactly how I was related. But she had been a cook in Edinburgh for all of her life, I think. And when she retired, she must have been in her 70s. I really couldn't put my finger around how old she would have been. But she came to stay with my grandparents in Coll. And since she was unmarried, and she had a few collections like perfume bottles and things, and she had this stone that she told me about that she had found herself in Coinneach on her croft. And she gave this to me, and I always kept it in a very safe place, and I would occasionally show people about the history of it. And I wanted to donate it back again, especially near the stones where it came from originally. And I wanted to put it in Miss Jane Mackenzie's name, 27 Coinneach, on whose croft this was found.
Now we can show a photo of the stone which I took myself. Are you presenting that over to them over in Briascus at the centre?
They thought it was like the Hope Diamond or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yes.
I couldn't believe how precious they thought of it.
Isn't it funny though that this lady she was as well known in Coll as Sheena Coinneach,
right,
who looked after Coinneach and his wife after she had retired. Then when Coinneach and his wife died, she went back over to Coinneach, and some of the family are still over there.
Yes.
So you've brought a bit of Lewis history, not only the history of this area, but important Lewis history back in that stone, which is shaped and looks as if it was used for maybe cleaning leather or something.
Well, they thought it actually was a skinning knife,
yes,
because it was sharpened. It was kind of small at one end and wide at the other, but it was sharpened on that end.
Yes, I've got a photo of it on my phone here, and I'll maybe try and find it. But so, what happened in Detroit then that caused the dispersal of the Lewis community? Was it the race riots in the 1960s when people basically left the centre of Detroit and people went to live in the outskirts? Was that it?
It just kind of fizzled out. I think that the church, some of them got very good living and didn't want to attend the Lewis Society at that time because so many different programs coincided with each other, whether on purpose or otherwise, I'm not sure. But it was kind of our generation starting to take over, and I was there the night they decided that would be the last night, so they auctioned off all of the stuff that they had, and I think I got the coffee urn, which I later gave to the church, and that's where it probably is now.
Do you want that's the stone. Are you able to? As the stone was found. I'm now going to take another view of it, and this view will probably better show how it was meant as a skinning stone, possibly. So that's going over to college. So here you are back again. It must get quite difficult actually coming back, because the truth of the matter is that many of the people who were your friends and your contemporaries are no longer here when you come back.
Or are very sick at the moment that I hope to see. But I was very close to a lot of the people, and still am every time I come back.
Well, it's so nice to see you again,
And it's good to know you, because at first you were not acknowledging that we were related.
I didn't know. I didn't know that we were related. Nowadays they don't know who their first cousins are. Well, I didn't know. I did know my first cousins. Second cousins, some of them. Third cousins, very few of them. And when I met you first, I was editor of the Stornoway Gazette, and I went into the county hotel for a cup of coffee. And this American woman came and said, I'm related to you. I said, Coinneach, I should. You know.
Oh, he rolled his eyes. It's impossible.
But then, of course, but funny, the reason I did know you was Coinneach, but I had heard in the school guests so often talking about the parcels of clothes you used to get from Agnes Coinneach in America. And that was actually the connection, first of all, before I realised that we were actually closely related. Through the family at 36 Coll.
But you made a call maybe a year later, wanting to get Callum to talk about Ford Motor Company. I said, I know that he's going to say no, but I said, I think I'm talking to cousin Kenny, am I?
Yes.
And he says, I suppose so. And
Yeah.
I said, well, let me take the suppose out of this and talk about that I was at your parents' wedding.
Yes, well, you were, so you were there before I was, and you were here before I was. But also before I leave, there was one person, I was very sorry to hear that he was no longer with us. He was from this area to Mother Martin Morocco Solid, you know, who I remember coming out. He actually held the Lewis Society stuff. He had kept it for all these years. Left it with you to have a good look at it, and then sent it over to us. So we were very sorry to hear that Morocco had passed away.
And he was one of my favourite cousins. He was a first cousin.
A nice man.
I was very, very close to him.
Such is life. Peggy, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to do this in front of here, and I hope people will look at this and enjoy it.
I hope they won't be embarrassed by anything I say, because something that comes into my mind sometimes pops out when it shouldn't.
They'll be asking, but anyway, the ones who would know, they probably won't have a computer to watch it on anyway. So thank you very much indeed, Peggy. There you are.